Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we're going to cover a really commonly debated, not so much debated, but topic that confuses non-native Japanese speakers a lot, myself included. So what we're going to cover today is the te form of verbs plus the extra verb iru to mean has verbed instead of is verbing. So in a previous video we've covered this actual example before as is verbing, te form plus iru as is verbing. In this case it's going to mean has verbed instead, which is an entirely different meaning, and this is where the Japanese language shows one of its most complicated features in that it is a language of aspect as opposed to a language of tense. So just to simplify things, we're going to define this construct, te form plus iru as has verbed, as a way to denote a change in state as a result of something happening. So you still might be confused as to how to tell which is being used when you use te form plus iru. Am I saying is verbing or has verbed? And the good news is that for the most part, it depends on the verb that you use. And if you use this particular verb in its te form plus iru, then it's gonna always mean is verbing or has verbed. And once you know which one it means for that verb, then you can kind of just commit that to memory and get on your merry way. So in this video, we'll cover a few of those verbs that when used in their te form plus iru mean has verbed instead of is verbing. And as for the rest of them, which is actually quite a lot, you can easily find them on the internet. There are charts that extensively list those verbs that mean has verbed instead of is verbing when they're used in their te form plus iru. So that is a good thing to do after this video, basically, to commit to memory those verbs. So for our first example, we'll compare the past tense with the te iru form to mean has verbed. So for the first version of the first example, we have the line Sono mise wa hirakimashita. And what this sentence is basically saying is that store opened. Let's break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have sono, which is going to mean that. We have mise, which is store. We have wa, which is marking the store as the topic. And then we have hirakimashita, which is going to be the past polite form of the verb hiraku, which means to open. So sono mise wa hirakimashita is just going to be that store opened because it happened in the past, so it's in the past tense, so it opened. On the other hand, now we're going to use the te form plus iru to mean has verbed. So for the second version of our first example, we have sono mise wa hiraite imasu. And what this sentence means is that store has opened. That's the direct translation, basically. If we were to loosely translate into English, I guess we could more or less just say that store opened, just because it still expresses the resultant state of the store, which is being opened. So in a sense, when you translate it and it's a loose translation, this can basically mean the same thing as the past tense in this case, but there is the distinction to be made in the Japanese native language that we need to understand. So sono mise wa hiraite imasu is not that store is opening, it's that store has opened. Something has occurred, the store has opened, and now there's a resultant change of state in which the store is the status of being opened and not being closed. For our next example sentence, we have the line Kare gaアメリカから来ています. And what this sentence is basically saying is he has come from America. So if we break down this sentence bit by bit, first up we have kare, which is going to mean he. We have ga, marking him as the subject. We have America, which means America. We have kara, which means from, so from America. And then we have kite imasu, which is has come. So altogether, he has come from America. Kare ga Amerika kara kite imasu. So again, this does not mean he is coming from America. The sentence here expresses that he has already arrived in the location that we are in, which is, I don't know, implicitly Japan maybe. He has already come from America, and now he is in the process of basically visiting whatever place we are in right now. This again expresses a resultant state as a result of an action that happened. He came from America, and now he is in this state of more or less visiting this country. For our last example, we're going to use probably the most well-known, well-used verb of this grammar construct, and that is just the verb shiru, which means to know. So for our sentence, we have George Washington shiteimasu ka? And when we translate this sentence, probably the best way to translate this is do you know George Washington? If we break down the sentence bit by bit, we have George Washington. So that's just going to be George Washington. Then we have shite imasu ka. So shite imasu ka is going to be the te form plus iru form of the verb shiru, to know. Then we have the particle ka at the end to make into a question. So George Washington shite imasu ka is going to be, do you know George Washington? That's the pretty general translation, but if we were to translate this more literally, it would be something along the lines of, have you gotten to know George Washington? Most importantly, this does not mean, are you in the process of knowing George Washington? A correct translation would be, do you know George Washington? And a really literal translation would be the, have you gotten to know George Washington? So the have you gotten to know George Washington literal translation is representative of this concept that we've been going by, in which there is a resultant state, the person now in the condition of knowing George Washington, that resulted from an action, which was the act of getting to know him. So yeah, like I said, shite iru, or in its polite form shite imasu, is going to be a very common example of this grammar construct. I'm sure you can see how in everyday conversation somebody will ask you if you know this person or if you know of this thing. So shite iru, in a sense, is a very good reminder of this distinction between has verbed and is verbing, shite iru. As for the rest of the verbs that also display this differentiation, it's just on the accountability of you as a learner of the Japanese language to learn it by experience and keep it to mind. And this is definitely one of those strong examples of a grammar construct that you need time to get used to, basically. So yeah, that's how we use the te form plus iru as meaning has verbed.